Namaste and an excellent evening to all of you. The Advocates Association of Western India, the Bombay Bar Association, and the Bombay Incorporated Law Society extend a warm and hearty welcome to the Honorable Chief Justice of India, Chief Justice Chandrachud, and other dignitaries on the dais, dignitaries of the dais, and each and everyone in this gathering. We are sure Chief Justice Chandrachud feels completely nostalgic visiting his alma mater of judicial career. This English Gothic edifice, the wooden balustrades that we see in the rostrum of the central court, the high roof of the central court, the carved etchings in this court would all resonate with memories for him. Welcome home, Chief Justice Chandrachud. The Honorable Chief Justice of the Bombay High Court, Chief Justice Devendra Kumar Upadhyay, has kindly acceded to our request to preside over the function today. We are indeed grateful, Chief Justice Upadhyay. We have also amongst us Ms. Kalpana Das. Welcome, Ms. Das. I now request Ms. Farzana Madam to deliver the welcome address. Thank you.
The Honorable Chief Justice Dr. CJI Chandrachud, Honorable Chief Justice Devendra Kumar Upadhyay, Honorable Judges of the Bombay High Court, Ms. Kalpana Das, the Learned Advocate General Dr. Birendra Saraf, Mr. Nitin Thakkar, President of the Bombay Bar Association, Mr. Prashant Relikar, President of AVI, my esteemed colleagues and friends. I am indeed honored at being requested to give the welcome address at this function organized by our three bars to felicitate His Lordship, the Honorable Chief Justice of India, Dr. Dhananjay Chandrachud. Justice Chandrachud has, since the beginning of his career, been one of us, being a member of our bar and having practiced in our court till his elevation as a judge of our court, a position he held for a tenure of 13 years, till he was once again elevated as the Chief Justice of Allahabad in 2013, thereafter as a judge of the Supreme Court in 2016, and then as the 50th Chief Justice of India in November 2022. His Lordship demits office on 10th November 2024, leaving behind a legacy which will not be forgotten for a very long time. Whilst recently speaking about His Lordship to friends and colleagues, the consensus was that His Lordship is supremely intelligent, has a fantastic memory and clarity of thought, expression, and a deep knowledge of law, all coupled with a sense of compassion. The same is evident not only from His Lordship's judgments, whether they deal with the right of privacy, free speech, personal liberty, gender justice, decriminalization of same-sex relationships, the environment, or any other branch of law. But the same is also evident from his interactions with one and all. A solicitor's stenographer who used to take dictation from His Lordship when His Lordship was a young advocate told me just a couple of days ago that when His Lordship would give dictation, whether it be of a plain petition or any other pleading, there would be complete clarity of thought, no hesitation, and no mistakes. The draft would be perfect in its first version itself, as His Lordship would be completely prepared with the matter. At the bar dinner held in 2022 to felicitate His Lordship on his appointment as Chief Justice of India, we all witnessed His Lordship's ability to remember the names of all of us who practiced at the time His Lordship was in Mumbai. Each of us were greeted by our names, though he may not have met us personally in more than a decade. It was something which I personally found amazing, probably because I lacked the same ability. Despite his lordship having attained the highest position in the Indian judiciary, he has clearly remained a humble and entirely approachable individual, as he was when I for the first time spoke to him outside this very court when we were both appearing for different parties in a writ petition filed by medical students. Let me end by his lordship's own observation in the case of Navtej Singh Johar, where his lordship stated, "Our ability to recognize others who are different is a sign of our own evolution. We miss the symbols of a compassionate and humane society only at our peril." We warmly welcome his lordship to our court, which was also his lordship's initial karma bhumi. Let me take this opportunity to wish his lordship, on behalf of all of us, a future filled with eternal joy, contentment and happiness. I'm certain that though his lordship will be demitting office in a few days, we will continue to hear about his future achievements for several years to come.
Thank you, Farzana. As a small token of our affection and gratitude, and in tandem with our objective of green sustainability, we offer a sapling to our esteemed dignitary along with certain mementos. May I request Mr. Y.P. Dandiwala, Vice President of the Bombay Incorporated Law Society, to present the sapling to the Honorable Chief Justice, Justice Chandrachud. Mr. Vikas Kolekar, Vice President AAWI, will present a shawl and Shrifal, the latter word combining Shri, which reflects auspiciousness, and Fal, which means fruit, to the Honorable Chief Justice Chandrachud. May I now request Mr. Venkatesh Dhond, Vice President, Bombay Bar Association, to present a memento to the Honorable Chief Justice Chandrachud. Ms. Prachi Tatke, Vice President AAWI, will present a sapling to the Honorable Chief Justice Devendra Kumar Upadhyay. Mr. Ankit Lohia, Treasurer of the Bombay Bar Association, will present a memento to Ms. Kalpana Das. Mr. Nitin Thakkar, Mr. Prashant Relekar, Ms. Farzana Behram Kamdin, President of all the three associations, will jointly present a silver plaque to the Honorable Chief Justice Dr. D.Y. Chandrachud. Ladies and gentlemen, this plaque commemorates the yeoman service of Honorable Chief Justice of India, Chief Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, in the following words: felicitating Honorable Dr. Justice Dhananjay Y. Chandrachud, the 50th Chief Justice of India, for his distinguished service, unwavering dedication, and commitment to justice. We honor and celebrate a legacy which will continue to impact and inspire for years to come. With deep appreciation and affection, Bombay Bar Association, Advocates Association of Western India, and Bombay Incorporated Law Society. May I now request Mr. Prashant Arekar, President of the Advocates Association of Western India, to deliver his introductory address. Thank you.
Good evening, Honorable Chief Justice of India, Dr. CJI Chandrachud, Honorable Chief Justice of Bombay High Court, Shri Devendra Kumar Upadhyay, other distinguished judges, Advocate General of Maharashtra, Dr. Birendra Saraf, President of Bombay Bar Association, Mr. Nitin Thakkar, President of Bombay Incorporated Law Society, Mrs. Farzana Behram Kamdin, and Kalpana Das. It is my distinct honor and privilege as the President of Advocate Association of Western India to stand before you today and extend my heartfelt welcome to Honorable Chief Justice of India, Dr. CJI Chandrachud, and also to each and everyone who are present over here for this special occasion. It is with mixed and admiration, respect, and tinge of sadness that we gather here today to honor the exemplary career and incredible contribution of one of the most esteemed legal minds of our time, the Honorable Chief Justice of India, Dr. CJI Chandrachud. His Lordship has often been regarded as a person with extraordinary legal mind, a reformist, a visionary, and a man whose contribution to the Indian judiciary will resonate the generation to come. Under your Lordship leadership, the judiciary has navigated the complex legal challenges and monumental cases that will be remembered in Indian history. Born into a legal family with a towering legacy, being the son of longest-serving Chief Justice of India, Justice Y.V. Chandrachud, your Lordship compounded his legal education with the LLM from Harvard University in 1983. After obtaining the INLAC scholarship and received the Joseph H. BL Prize for securing the highest marks in the conflict of law courses, stayed at Harvard until in 1986 to complete his doctorate of juridical science. A lot of students pursued education from foreign universities and never intend to return back. But in spite of having such a promising career and having completed his master and doctorate from the world's best law university, his Lordship not only returned but also brought the ideas from the best universities of the world and envisioned it in our motherland. He not only upheld the family tradition but has built up his own benchmark of its own. His Lordship career, spanning over decades, has been marked by intellectual rigors, a firm commitment to the constitutional principle, and forward-thinking approach to the law. Perhaps one of the most remarkable aspects of Chief Justice Chandrachud's legacy is the Lordship commitment to safeguarding the rights of individuals. His Lordship landmark judgment in Justice K.S. Puttaswamy v. Union of India, which upheld the rights to privacy as a fundamental rights under the Constitution, was not just a legal victory, it was a victory for every citizen of India. It highlighted the need for the balance between the state powers and individual freedoms. Establishing the dignity and autonomy of the individual must always come first. His Lordship has been tireless advocate for bringing institutional changes and judicial reform, always pushing the boundaries to ensure that the justice delivery system is accessible, transparent, and efficient. His Lordship tenure as the Chief Justice has been marked by his commitment to embracing technology and modernization court process. His Lordship has not only advanced the cause of justice, but also set a standard of judicial activism that balances progress with the rule of law. His Lordship's vision as just, equal, and inclusive India will continue to inspire generations of judges, scholars, and legal practitioners, and we move forward to pursue the fair and just society. His Lordship have left an unforgettable mark on the Indian legal system, creating a pathway for future reforms. In conclusion, His Lordship is not just a judge who has interpreted the law. He is a reformer who has redefined the very essence of justice in India. His Lordship tenure stands as a testament to the power of law is creating the society that upholds the dignity of every individual, regardless of his genders, caste, and socio-economic status. On behalf of AWA entire legal fraternity, I express our deepest gratitude to Honorable Chief Justice of India, Your Lordship's outstanding contribution to the legal system of India. Your Lordship legacy will continue to inspire us. Your Lordship wisdom, compassion will serve as a guiding light for the judiciary for years to come. Thank you, sir, for your tireless dedication, your profound wisdom, your progressive vision, your resolute commitment to the justice, and your balanced and reasonable approach and fair sense of judgment. Your absence will be felt by all of us. You will be dearly missed. As you move to the next chapter of your life, we wish you peace, good health, fulfillment, and continuous success. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rayekar. I now request Mr. Nitin Thakkar, President of the Bombay Bar Association, to share his views with the audience. Mr. Thakkar.
Honorable the Chief Justice of India, Dr. CJI Chandrachud, Honorable Chief Justice of Bombay High Court, Sri Devendra Upadhyay, other honorable judges of this honorable court, Honorable Ms. Justice Mary Baker, former judge of Supreme Court of Ireland, Ms. Anita Kelly, Consul General of Ireland, and other members of Irish delegation, Madam Kalpana Dasji, Learned Advocate General Dr. Birendra Saraf, office bearers and members of Advocate Association of Western India, Bombay Incorporated Law Society and Bombay Bar Association, senior advocates, members of registry, ladies and gentlemen. My lord, a few days ago, we read in newspaper that you are apprehensive as to how your tenure will be judged. I think the presence of the large number of advocates in this courtroom today, and this being live streamed to all our other benches, and all so many advocates today joining online to watch these proceedings, I believe must be allaying your fear that there is no such thing as any fear about how your tenure was. I am deeply honored to have this opportunity to say a few words at the felicitation of a prolific member of Bombay Bar Association, Dr. CJI Chandrachud, Chief Justice of India. I believe you are 10th Chief Justice of a member of Bombay Bar Association out of 50. There are various facets of Chief Justice Chandrachud's career, and it would take hours to speak, but paucity of time prevents me from engaging with all of them. Instead, it is a trait of compassion that runs as a common thread through several of his judgments that I would like to touch upon. Justice Chandrachud brings up a unique and deeply humane perspective to the bench. His rulings consistently reflect an understanding of justice as not merely an abstract principle, but as a live reality for individuals facing significant challenges. In doing so, Justice Chandrachud has not just wielded the gavel, but has wielded empathy, shaping countless futures by fostering faith in the rule of law. As Pound once said, the law must be stable, but it must not stand still. Justice Chandrachud's tenure embodies this sentiment. Law reports are replete with his transformative judgments across an array of subjects, some of which were referred to by Mr. Rayekar. To quote Justice Chandrachud's own words in Puttaswamy judgment, when histories of nations are written and critiqued, there are judicial decisions at the forefront of liberty. History will undoubtedly remember Justice Chandrachud as a champion of the principles of equality, dignity, and inclusion. The decisions in Puttaswamy and Joseph Shine on the right to privacy and decriminalization of adultery, respectively, are but two notable instances of Justice Chandrachud's unwavering commitment to constitutional ideals, where he overruled his father's judgment in pursuit of his judicial duty. When asked by a reporter about overruling ADM Jabalpur, Justice Chandrachud simply exclaimed that we decide for our society here and now to the best of our ability, and when I overruled my father's judgment, it happened to be my father's judgment, but it was a judgment after all. This shows that justice is to be done with open eyes. From the decriminalization of Section 377 of IPC in Navtej Singh Johar to the recognition of the right to die with dignity in common cause, from protecting the abortion rights of an unmarried woman in X versus Principal Secretary, to recognizing disability as a social and not merely medical construct in Ravindra Kumar Dhariwal, time and again, Justice Chandrachud has emphasized the primacy of constitutional morality. It is through his dynamic interpretations of golden triangle of Articles 14, 19, and 21 that he has brought about a paradigmatic shift of demonstrating that just because something is unconventional doesn't mean that it ought to be criminal so long as it is rooted in constitutional principles. Armed with the Constitution, Justice Chandrachud has effected change and addressed inequalities on a structural level. In Babita Punia's case, he confronted gender discrimination in armed forces by ending the categorical exclusion of women from permanent positions. In State of Punjab versus Devinder Singh, he upheld the constitutional validity of the sub-classification of scheduled castes. In Vikas Kumar, his decision on delinking reasonable accommodation from benchmark disability to recognize the individuality of persons with disabilities prompted the Government of India's Department of Disability Affairs to reformulate the applicable guidelines. This is a judge who has unabashedly espoused substantive over formal equality. As Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg once said, real change, enduring change, happens one step at a time. We can safely say that Justice Chandrachud has taken many a step in his tenure. He dedicated his career to ensuring that every segment of society was represented within the legal system and made justice for underserved a mission, ensuring all voices found equal representation in the judiciary. His push for translation of judgments into regional languages has reduced the distance between the courts and every last member of the public the judiciary seeks to serve. His court epitomized decorum, where civility and grace defined each proceedings. Those who behaved in uncivilized manner were dealt with firm hand. With a forward-looking embrace of virtual hearings and digitization, he extended justice's reach nationwide. He upheld fairness among counsel by implementing a zero face value policy. When one reflects on Shakespeare's oft-quoted words that some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them, Justice Chandrachud personifies a rare blend of all three in equal measure. As we celebrate Justice Chandrachud's exceptional contributions, let us bear in mind that his legacy urges us to continue advocating for the rights of all individuals, ensuring that the principles of equality and justice resonate throughout our society. May his work inspire us all to push for a more inclusive future. On behalf of Bombay Bar Association and all its members, I wish your Lordship a very great future and all the best.
Thank you, Mr. Thakkar. I'm also reminded of the fact that besides habeas corpus case where His Lordship overturned his father's judgment, I think there's also one more case dealing with adultery wherein your Lordship did the same thing. May I now request Dr. Saraf, Learned Advocate General, to address the gathering.
Honorable Chief Justice of India, Dr. D.Y. Chandrachud, Honorable Chief Justice of Bombay High Court, Shri Devendra Ji Upadhyay, Honorable Judges of our court, Mrs. Kalpana Das, Nitin Bhai, Mr. Prashant Rilekar, Mrs. Farzana Kamdin, the respected senior members of the bar, members of the registry, and my very dear friends. It is my absolute privilege and honor to speak today. when we assemble to bid farewell to and celebrate the remarkable tenure of a person who has completely dedicated 25 years of his life to the judiciary, an exceptional leader, a steadfast champion of justice, and someone who has renewed and strengthened the faith of every citizen in the institution of judiciary, my senior at the bar and the Chief Justice of India, Dr. D.Y. Chandrachud. Today I have a confession to make. It was 1998 and I happened to be a part of Dr. Chandrachud's chamber. And when I came to know that he has decided to accept judgeship, I was extremely disappointed. I went up to him and I said, "Why are you doing this?" I must have gone home and even prayed that I hope he doesn't become a judge. Today I realize how wrong I was and what a loss it would have been to the entire nation had my prayers been answered. And today for once, I thank God for not answering that prayer of mine. And what a tenure this has been. Throughout his tenure, Justice Chandrachud worked with an unwavering commitment to upholding the Constitution and the rule of law, to ensure that justice is served with fairness and compassion. He has worked tirelessly to empower every citizen, regardless of their socio-economic condition, to seek justice with ease and confidence. Justice is not just a right. It is a foundation of a fair and just society. As the Chief Justice of India, Justice Chandrachud led from the front to build a robust system where every individual feels heard, represented, and protected. He often voiced openly his concern for the marginalized sections of the society, the concerns which he repeatedly raised about protecting and securing the rights of women, the backward class of citizens, persons facing physical and mental challenges, transgenders, persons with distinct sexual orientation, and even the junior members of the bar, reflect his deep sense of empathy and compassion and his desire to ensure that justice is served to them, and he left no stone unturned to achieve that. As a jurist, with his wisdom, balance, and foresight, Justice Chandrachud navigated complex legal landscapes. His judgments have led to India being recognized internationally as a nation sensitive and protective of the needs of every section of the society, much ahead of many developed nations. The vision reflected in each of his judgments is one of a nation where every person is treated fairly and equally, an aim and purpose which is the golden thread that binds our entire Constitution. Equally significant are the administrative reforms introduced by him. The administrative reforms introduced by him have revitalized our system, ensured and encouraged efficiency, and fostered a culture of transparency and accountability. By adopting cutting-edge technology with ease, he has been instrumental in virtually changing the entire landscape of the judicial system. Through e-courts and virtual courts, justice is today made available at the doorstep of every citizen. The initiative taken by him to have the judgments of the High Courts and the Supreme Court translated into different local languages have ensured that every citizen can understand his rights and the decisions of the constitutional courts. The facilities made available by him in the Supreme Court for the staff and lawyers demonstrates his concern and compassion for every wheel in the chariot of justice. And in the midst of all this, as a person, he remained as he was when I first saw him nearly 3 decades back, with the same smile, the same affection, and the same warmth to one and all. Justice Chandrachud has been a pioneer, a visionary who has shaped the judiciary. With his unwavering dedication and his relentless and matchless passion, he had the courage to challenge the status quo and push boundaries which have led to changes which have had the effect of molding not just the future of the judiciary, but this nation as a whole. Every waking moment of his tenure as a CJI, which were very long hours, he was consumed by a passion and fueled by his conviction to bring about the much needed improvements in the system. Even when he slept for those few hours, I have no doubt that he dreamt only of a robust and independent judiciary. He leaves behind an indelible imprint on history, footprints that time cannot erase. The legacy which he leaves will continue to inspire and motivate, and for that we shall ever be grateful. I'm sure he'll continue to guide both the bar and bench in the years ahead. And on behalf of the entire bar in the state of Maharashtra, I wish him every happiness, good health, and a long tenure of whatever he feels like doing ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Saraf. May I now request the Honorable Chief Justice of the Bombay High Court to deliver the presidential address.
Honorable Dr. Justice Dhananjay Chandrachud, Chief Justice of India, Madam Kalpana Das, my esteemed sister and brother judges, Honorable Miss Justice Mary Baker, former Judge of Supreme Court of Ireland and current Chair, Electoral Commission of Ireland, and members of her delegation who visited our High Court today, Dr. Biren Saraf, Advocate General, State of Maharashtra, Mr. Sangram Desai, Chairman, Bar Council of Maharashtra and Goa, Mr. Nitin Thakkar, President, Bombay Bar Association, Mr. Prashant Relekar, President, Advocates Association of Western India, Ms. Farzana Behram Kamdeen, President, Bombay Incorporated Law Society, office bearers of bar associations, learned senior advocates, and members of bar, members of registry, and friends, Namaskar. मुंबई है आपकी और आज मेरा घर भी है। आपके घर में मैं हूं और आप मेरे घर में हैं। We are all delighted and filled with emotions to receive Honorable Justice Dr. Dhananjay Chandrachud, Chief Justice of India, amongst us. Welcome home, sir. Welcome, ma'am. Sir, with your elevation as 50th Chief Justice of India in November 2022, we have taken pride in asserting that a son of the soil of this great state of Maharashtra, with a distinguished career in law, has reached most deservedly the pinnacle of Indian judiciary. We still hold that pride and will continue to do so in future as well. I can attest, as everyone present here will, that Justice Chandrachud has been true to his conscience. Sir, you have brought to the judiciary of the country not only your abundant wisdom and fairness, but your passion for a different work culture, grace and courage. You have certainly made it a better institution. We all speak of you with love and reverence. In a society governed by any political government, be it a democracy, democracies of different kinds, a monarchy, or even a military rule, what are the two most valued aspirations people aspire for? To my mind, it is liberty and equality. Permit me to say, my lord, you have guarded these twin values of liberty and equality overzealously. You have served not as a judge of the highest court of the land, but throughout you have been an advocate of justice. You, by your gentle ways, have influenced nearly every corner of the judiciary. We all speak of you with pride, reverence, and smile. I have had a privilege of sharing the bench with you. Believe me, sir, seated to your left on the bench, I was always filled with the feeling of inadequacy But the very next moment, I always found myself at such an ease that I could give my inputs to the matter on board. As a mentor, you have inspired many, but perhaps none more than law students. I still remember your address at the convocation ceremony at Dr. Ram Manohar Lohia National Law University, Lucknow, where I was also part of the function. It was a treat to listen to you on that occasion. Graduating students, after your address, were filled with emotions, encouragement, and a sense of gratitude. Much has been said by my previous speakers about your various achievements and contributions made by you. However, I would like to highlight your efforts and endeavors in advancing the e-court project, which aims to digitize the judiciary at all levels. Under your leadership, the project has introduced several innovative measures, including courts for adjudicating cases online, the interoperable criminal justice system, the real-time data exchange between courts and police, development of user-friendly e-filing software, implementation of online payment systems, and establishment of e-seva kendras for those lacking internet access. Additionally, initiatives such as National Service and Tracking of Electronic Processes and a comprehensive judgment search portal have enhanced efficiency of the legal processes in the country. Various other reforms introduced in the system by you will go a long way in the annals of judicial history of this country. These reforms reflect your vision for a modern technology-driven judiciary which has been widely recognized. Such tireless efforts in modernizing our judicial system and unrelenting passion for opening windows for access to justice has indeed been commendable and laudable. In fact, all this is in tune with your statement when you were sworn in as Chief Justice of India, that your priority will be to serve common man whose trust in judiciary will be strengthened through action, not merely by words. I have no doubt whatsoever that your legacy will endure not only in the judgments rendered, but also in the countless lives you have influenced and the values you have instilled in all of us. I find it fair to say that one who has devoted his entire life to this great institution of judiciary will not be retiring. We all expect it will not be long before you will return to the cause of justice, of course, in a different role. We will miss you greatly, but we shall not forget the lessons that you taught by your words, more importantly, by your example. As you embark on a new innings of your life ahead, we celebrate your dedication, wisdom, contribution to the society at large, and the judiciary in particular. Your influence will continue to resonate within the hallowed halls of our legal system to the sheer benefit of the future generations. Justice Chandrachud, while in Lucknow, developed a taste for Urdu poetry, and therefore, I will conclude my address today by reciting a couplet. सितारों के आगे जहां और भी हैं, अभी इश्क के इम्तहां और भी हैं, तू शाही है, परवाज है काम तेरा. शाही means a high flying bird. परवाज means to fly. तू शाही है, परवाज है काम तेरा, तेरे सामने आसमां और भी हैं. We wish you joy, peace and fulfillment in all your future endeavors. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Justice Upadhyay. Ladies and gentlemen, he has been a recipient of the Joseph Beale Prize from the Harvard University. He did his doctorate of juridical sciences from Harvard. The 50th Chief Justice of India, Honorable Dr. Justice Dhananjay Chandrachud, was the Additional Solicitor General from 1998 till his elevation as a judge. A jurist, an academic, an author and an eloquent speaker, and may I tell the young members of the bar who are here in large number, a most sought after professor in the Bombay University. Justice Chandrachud has spearheaded the proliferation of technology in judiciary, one of the vital consequences of which I think is the democratization of the bar. May I now request Justice Chandrachud to kindly address the candidate. Ladies and gentlemen, Justice Chandrachud.
Thank you very much, Deepa. Chief Justice Devendra Upadhyay, Chief Justice of the High Court of Judicature at Bombay, the judges of the Bombay High Court, including the 5 newly sworn-in judges, you could actually form a constitution bench, as we call it in the Supreme Court. Congratulations to all of you. The Advocate General, Dr. Biren Saraf, President of the Bombay Bar Association, Shri Natin Thakkar, President of the Advocates Association of Western India, Mr. Prashant Radekar, President of the Bombay Incorporated Law Society, Faizana Behram Kamdin, distinguished guests from Ireland, senior and other members of the bar who have assembled here and really humbled me by your presence. And last but not the least, my best friend, critic, but above all, my fierce protector, my own spouse, Kalpana. I decided not to speak from a prepared text. My secretary and my law clerks reminded me yesterday that I have to speak this evening, and have I prepared something. Partly due to the pressure of work, we were working on Constitution bench judgments which I have to deliver before my term comes to an end. But above all, it's not just the pressure of work. I was wondering how I sum up 40 years of a judicial career, the best moments of which, in a sense, have been spent in the precincts of this court in the space of a few moments. You know, in the movie Love Story, which I'm sure so many of you, at least of my generation, have seen, there's a song which begins with the words, "Where do I begin?" And that's something which struck me, where do I begin? But then as I sat here, I'm sure you saw me writing furiously, the memories all just started flooding into my mind, just sitting here and observing the beauty of this courtroom and the warmth of your friendship and affection. Well, I was very happy to learn a few months ago when you hosted the first reference for a retiring judge, Justice Gautam Patel. Happy not because Gautam was retiring, because you lost such a fine judge, a very erudite judge. But happy because I thought perhaps I have a little sliver of a hope that you might just decide to host a reference for me now. I always watch the podcasts of the Bombay Bar Association, the lectures which are hosted online. When the day is done, I look at something new, an interview, a speech by Mr. Thakkar, a speech by your retiring judges. So I thought there was cause for hope for me. I've had previous speeches in this very hall, the Central Court. There was a conference on mediation in the late 1990s when Chief Justice M.B. Shah thought that since I had organized the conference, and it was a conference on mediation of which we didn't know much at that time, that I should be given that slot of the last speaker that evening. So after a day of work was over, I was the last speaker that evening. I was here when you felicitated me when I became a judge of the Supreme Court. And then 2 years ago, when you invited me when I assumed the office of Chief Justice of India. But today is very different for me. Today is a moment of thanksgiving. It's a moment of reflection, but it's also a moment of remembrance. Thanksgiving because I owe everything to this institution. Reflection on what the journey has been, and remembrance for those who have come here in that great tradition of the bar and the bench, and in whose path we have tried to follow suit. Well, Farzana began by saying that the stenographer whom she met told her how flawlessly I would dictate plaints or petitions in suits or writ petitions. Well, there's a sting in the tail, as there is always a sting in the tail behind every story. We used to have this wonderful stenographer called Aziz, who used to be working for one of the judges over here. Now, the reason why everybody felt we dictated flawlessly was about midway through the argument, midway through the dictation, Aziz would just put up his hand and say, "I'll now do the rest for you." Fortunately, I didn't carry that tradition to the bench of allowing my stenographer to take charge of what I was going to dictate. So when you came to the end of the dictation on facts and you were about to dictate that you sought a writ of certiorari to quash that government order or seeking a writ of mandamus for the performance of a public duty, and most important, the interim relief which really decided the fate of the case, usually Aziz would tell you that, "I know what is to be done, I'll frame everything properly." The only regret which we had in those days was that the fee which we marked for the brief was a fraction of what he charged for typing the writ petition. There have been very happy memories in this very courtroom. One of our very distinguished judges had initials which began with DR, and we called him Doctor. I'm saying something very complimentary, so I needn't fear of having to face a suit for defamation. Well, Doctor had a very nice brother, not as scholarly as Doctor, but yet a very loved figure at the bar, and we were beneficiaries of the briefs which he gave us. But true to the tradition of the bar, which does not know any bounds of the law of defamation or limitation, the young brother was called Compounder. Now, once in this court, the young lawyer, or not so young lawyer, was arguing before Justice Varyava. We didn't have the air conditioning in those days. There were no nets to keep the pigeons away, and there would be a constant flurry of pigeons entering this courtroom. As it so happened, when he was arguing before Justice Varyava, there was a pigeon dropping, which fortunately, unfortunately, fell straight on his gown. Now, there are several communities in the country, as you know, who believe that if there's a pigeon dropping or a dropping of a bird, that's a sign of auspiciousness. So a lawyer would be prone to believe that, well, that's going to result in an order in their favor. But lo and behold, Justice Varyava looked at him, and then gave him a half smile. And then he says, looks at Justice Varyava and says, "My lords, the peacocks have become very mischievous." But we also had a Chinese delegation in this courtroom, where one of those peacocks, the pigeons, hit the fan and then fell straight on the ground in a pool of blood. Now that I look at all these things from a vegan perspective, I say, what a loss of one more life in nature. As a Chinese delegation, I thought I was the general manager catering, as several of my colleagues called me, because I was in charge of ordering food for all these events. And I'd ordered all of the Indian Chinese food for the delegation, because I thought we will tell the Chinese what Indian Chinese looks like. And promptly, the Chief Justice sent for me and said, "But why do you have to order so many dishes of noodles? And can we not cut down on the expense?" So I then realized, that we had Chief Justices who were very scholarly, Chief Justices who were pretty much practical, others who were visionary. I used this courtroom to escape from clients and solicitors who were trying to chase me. Because one of the secrets which I had developed as a young lawyer was to go into a court where I was no work at all, because nobody would track you down in that court. and I would sit in the last row and read my cases which were likely to come up that day or the next day. And I spent so much of time watching from this courtroom. It used to be the tax bench when I was a young member of the bar, when all these ITRs, the income tax reports, would be spread out into this courtroom. But honestly, looking at so many of you who were so gracious in complimenting me this evening, looking at you and following your careers, I realize how distinguished you have become. Years ago, I would have called you Venki. Venkatesh came and gave me this lovely memento. There's, of course, my very dear colleague in chambers, Biren. Then there's Deepa, Farzana, so many of you who I now see across this courtroom, and forgive me for not mentioning all your names. But I do believe now that you have become so distinguished. Am I justified in calling you by your first names as I did then? But I must share a secret with you. When I joined the Bombay bar, the bar of our High Court, I joined the chambers of Mr. Temtan and Deharujana, a fearless lawyer, an erudite lawyer, a scholarly lawyer. We were a small chamber. He would carry his own satchel to his car, never relied on a peon to carry his briefs. I walked into his chamber and said, "Good morning, sir." And he said, "Look, there are no sirs at the Bombay bar. You better learn to call me Temtan." And I've carried that tradition through to this day in the Supreme Court. And I call all my colleagues by their first name. And I think that sets a sense of camaraderie, a basic degree of equality, particularly when you become senior as a judge or senior as a professional. The ability to reach out to people, to make them feel one with you and understand you and not be a distant spectator from you is the heart of any work in a public institution. Just this morning when I handed over a potted plant to the Chief Justice designate, my successor Justice Sanjeev Khanna, I said to myself, can I call him Sanjeev as I always do in the morning? And I said, well, at least until the 11th of November I'll do that. And after that I'll call him Chief Justice. Because there's something about calling each other by your first names which endears you to each other. And I think that has been the great tradition, particularly on the original side. On the appellate side, it was a little different because we, of course, belong to a different area of social life where we pride relationships, we respect relationships, and we expect that sense of respect by calling people with a more honorific name. But that shows the diversity of our court. This diversity which truly brings the melting pot of traditions, cultures, and ideas into the institution of the Bombay High Court. When I joined the profession, honestly, I was overwhelmed at entering into the portals of the Bombay High Court. I'd had a brief tenure of practice in the Supreme Court, but there was nothing like the Bombay High Court. My senior sat on the middle table in the bar library on the second floor, and there were distinguished members of the bar on that table. There was, of course, the redoubtable Avinash Rana, who I'm so grateful for his presence this evening, Iqbal Chagla, and so many other lawyers who were part of that central table. If we just walked into the corridors, we had judges like Justice Painse. Painse, for the simple reason that I mentioned, that if you walked by his courtroom after lunch and he had just assembled, you could be sure that it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. His sense of professionalism, he was always ready with all the briefs that came up before him. The ability to formulate minutes of the order, that taught us how to frame reliefs. Because very often, the truth or the substance of a matter lies in what relief we grant to the client, whether as judges or what relief you seek as a lawyer. Too often a good case can be lost just because the inability of a lawyer or the judge to formulate the relief which has to be granted. But Justice Painse, he was very brief, sometimes even curt. He couldn't stand up to fools, and I got the wrong end of the stick on a large number of occasions from him. But absolute sheer brilliance, and we were mentored by Justice Painse. Justice P.D. Desai, a distinguished Chief Justice who came here Calcutta's loss was Mumbai's gain. He was transferred from Calcutta to Mumbai because there was a little bit of a brawl in Calcutta. But Mumbai opened up its arms for this judge who would have a veritable darbar in the morning, trying to resolve cases through mediation at a point of time when nobody knew about mediation. And there would be family cases, labor cases, service cases, motor accidents cases, where he would be trying to resolve cases. As young lawyers, sometimes we joked about it. And we joked about it because we wanted our cases on the daily board to be called out. But now looking back in reflection, I realize the importance of what the judge did. Because he did believe that his role was not just about writing judgments, but bringing about true justice to the citizen, which he did sometimes by persuasion, a lot of times through the weight of personality which a judge commands, sometimes with a little bit of stick. But it tended to work. We had judges like Justice Lenton, fearless, sat in the tunnel court, as we called it, court number 37 on the first floor. Justice V.P. Tipnis, Justice Viju Tipnis. He had the ability, even if he was holding against you as a lawyer, he would have the ability to formulate what you had argued and lift it to a different level. So the great reward of appearing before Justice Tipnis was not the fact that you had won or lost, because that's subsidiary. Just as a doctor doesn't guarantee the success of the treatment of a patient, how can a lawyer guarantee a result? Because contingency fees anyway are illegal in India. But what he would do is that if you argued a point, he would lift your argument and place it at a level or pedestal which even you had not done. That was also a training to the lawyer of what I could have argued, but which I didn't. I argued perhaps at a much lower plane, but here was a judge who could lift what I argued into a different plane. So it was a training ground for those like me who became judges, but it was also a training ground for us as lawyers to understand how an argument, by a simple reconceptualization, can be lifted from the mundane to the sublime. Justice Sujata Manohar, one of the fine and first of the women judges to occupy judicial office here and then in the Supreme Court, not exactly the first in the Supreme Court, but a distinguished judge, grace personified, but grace combined with a strength of character and ability to stand up to anybody. There was no way anybody could browbeat the judge. Justice A.P. Shah was so fond of encouraging us as young members of the bar. I remember at the end of a long term like this, and I'm not going to keep it very long because I know it's the end of the term and you have a 2-week vacation, I was having a dosa with my dear chamber across the road in Welcome Restaurant when my peon came running to me and said, it was 7 o'clock or 7:15, and he said, please come, I've got your gown. Justice A.P. Shah is still sitting in court on the first floor. So those were the kind of judges who really nurtured us. Justice V.A. Mota, who came in from Nagpur and succeeded so brilliantly in this court. I don't know if I have narrated this story before, but if I have, maybe you'll forgive me for narrating it a second time. I was appearing before Justice Mota and Justice Jhunjhunwala in a case involving a sugar dispute of a sugar factory. We had argued that matter repeatedly, and then on a day like this, just before Diwali, it must have been 1995 or 1996, he called us to the chamber. They were dead against me. The court was completely against me. And he said, Dr. Chandrachud, you know, would you like to take your chance before another bench after Diwali? So we will not take up this matter. We'll release the matter. You can take your chance before someone else, perhaps? And I knew they were against me. And much to the consternation of Mr. Popat from Mullah and Mullah, who was briefing me in that case, I said, my lords, I'm quite conscious of the fact that you are completely against me. But I'm more than satisfied that you have understood every point that you have argued, and I have nothing further to argue in this case. So please, you can reserve judgment, and I know that I'm not likely to succeed, but that's where the balance of justice in your eyes lies, and I accept it. But I don't want to avoid the court and go to another bench today. So they said, but you know, we are really tired. This is a long term, and I think we're not really keen now. We want to leave the court. So I bowed to him and I left the chamber. Next term, we succeeded hands down before another bench. Which really also tells you that there is some astrological element in the outcomes of cases as well. Lawyers, my own senior, Mr. Andhyarujana, ramrod straight, as someone once told me when I joined his chamber, a no-nonsense lawyer. When we used to travel to Goa, and you had all these beautiful resorts which had come up in Goa, he insisted that we'll never spend the client's money staying in a fancy resort. He would always insist on staying at the Mandui, which was near the High Court in those days, because he said you shouldn't spend unnecessary money for the clients, and you're so close to the court. We would sit together till late hours every evening, working out cases. Mr. Sirvai, I had the good fortune of observing Mr. Sirvai in this court in his fading years. The brilliance was still there, the passion, the commitment to the cause of justice was there. I remember arguing the challenge to the validity of the Public Premises Eviction of Unauthorized Occupants Act, when he argued sitting down before a bench of Justice Bharucha and Justice Sri Krishna. Again, I was the last counsel to argue. And I pointed out something which was a new judgment which was dead against us. And Mr. Sirvai then got up and said, "My lords, this is in the best tradition of our bar. This young junior has cited a judgment which no one wanted to cite. And I was going to begin with this judgment. And I must compliment this junior." There was once a case where I was appearing before Chief Justice Chittatosh Mukherjee. We were serial number 1 on board. When Mr. Sirvai called our chamber at 10:15 in the morning, when Homi Sirvai called, my senior picked up the phone, and he was explaining to him what he was writing in the latest edition of the Constitutional Law of India on the judgment in Bachchan Singh, the death penalty case. This conversation went on from 10:15 to about 10 to 11. And my senior thought that, he was serial number, he was in the court, and I was actually in Justice Chittatosh Mukherjee's court for some small matter. So my senior handed over the phone to me and said to Mr. Sirvai, "I'll give you somebody who is the son of the author of the judgment in Bachchan Singh. So you better continue this conversation." Well, the conversation got over somewhere around 11:30. When my case was called out, Justice Chittatosh Mukherjee said, "Well, this junior doesn't have the courtesy of appearing." Judges in those days were very were very tough about passing over matters or keeping back matters, as we call it here. So my senior got up and said, "Well, please forgive my junior because he's in a conversation with Mr. Sirvai, which I had passed on to him." Mr. Nani Palkhiwala was in this court. He would never carry his own gown, and he would typically borrow a gown from one of the juniors. One of the greats of the bar who always forgot his gown in Bombay House, always took a gown from someone else, even if it was a young member of the bar, and always wore a gown, may not have been a senior's gown. That was the great tradition. I mean, look at the leveler that he was. Mr. V.R. Manohar again came from Nagpur and practiced here as the Advocate General. Even before that, we had Firoz Damania, the great and redoubtable labor lawyer. And we had a host of lawyers from the appellate side. It is said that when Motilal Setalwad would walk into the bar room on the appellate side, he would say that "I have come to the chamber of experts because I want an answer to a question of civil law." Because the lawyers on the appellate side were there was clarity of viewpoint, absolute clarity on the position on civil or criminal law of procedure. And there were so many of these lawyers on the appellate side who you'd just sit across them in a conference and understand the ability to unravel intricate questions of law in very simple terms. When I became a judge, I had to confront my own fears. Judgeship brings you back face to face with your own fears. As a lawyer, you can hide your fears by saying, "I'm not going to accept this brief." As a judge, you don't have the luxury of accepting or not accepting the brief because you have to answer everything that is on your board every day. Now, I was not a commercial lawyer. I thought that, public law was everything that there was to the practice of law. But nature has a very unique way of confronting you with your worst fears. And I was confronted with my own worst fears when I sat on the commercial bench. On my first or second day in the court, when I was sitting on a division bench with Justice A.P. Shah, I was open-mouthed because honestly, I was a little overwhelmed by the experience of sitting as a judge. In the first row, there was a fairly, there was a friend of ours at the bar who was sitting in the first row, and he opened his mouth exactly in the same manner that I was opening my mouth. When I suddenly realized that he was imitating me. Now, I was opening my mouth because I was just overwhelmed by the experience of suddenly making this transition from the bar to the bench. But then I realized from that little gesture that it's always nice to keep your mouth shut when you're a judge. I try to do that sometimes. But I was also told by Justice B.N. Srikrishna once that, judges tend to be talkative, particularly in the after lunch session, if only to ward off sleep after a heavy lunch. I learned from this court the great tradition of dictating judgments in court. I think this is one great tradition of our court, of not reserving judgments. So when I get a letter, and there's so many letters which come to the Chief Justice of India, there's almost nothing in the judicial system which is not brought to your attention. I'm told that, well, some judge has 300 judgments which are pending and which have not been delivered. And I say that, well, the only answer to this is to deliver judgments in court, which we learnt as judges of the Bombay High Court, because that brings a sense of clarity. The importance of dictating judgments in the court, as we learnt here, was that at a certain point, when a case is being argued, you are rotating the structure of the judgment in your mind. Now, whether or not you actually deliver judgment in a court, it may be a very complex case where you may not deliver judgment because it's going to be... There were times when judges were known to have delivered judgments for 7 days. For instance, the Lakshmi Cooperative Bank case. Judgment is delivered for 7 days on an end. I don't think judges today of the Bombay High Court had that luxury because your board would get clogged. But what happens really is by developing the art of dictating judgments in the court, you learn how to rotate the structure of the judgment in your mind. And I have carried this even when we are dealing with important cases in the Constitution bench. Several of my colleagues have asked me in the Supreme Court, how do you dictate immediately after arguments are over? And the answer to it is very simple, that when lawyers are arguing and you're in this parley with lawyers, you're constantly trying to develop a structure, not merely of the law, not merely of the facts, but how you're going to craft your judgment. And that is something which we learned from the High Court. My first opportunity to preside over a division bench, which came after almost 11 years of being a judge, was to preside over a tax bench. And when Justice J.N. Patel told me that I was going to preside over a tax bench, I said, but I haven't really done that much of tax work. So he said, that's exactly the reason why I've given you tax work. I want you to be challenged in whatever you're doing. So we learned to be challenged, but just as we learned as young judges, as fairly middle-level judges, as senior judges to be challenged, we had this great assistance of the bar. There were lawyers who would appear before you, and you knew that there would be not even one element of prevarication. You could actually take your notes on your notepad and dictate a judgment without consulting the relevant pages of the brief. So particularly for the young lawyers, I want to emphasize the importance of being ethical in the practice of law. In our effort to, tide over the competition, and the competition at the bar is becoming so intense today, there's a tendency to cut corners. Judges with the great burden of work may not be able to fathom every corner of a case, and maybe you'll get away with it by having perhaps hoodwinked the judge into not realizing that there was some other point in the case, especially if your lawyer on the other side is not vigilant enough. But the law has a tendency of catching up with you. And it is so very important, therefore, to be fair to the court. Because that is something in a reputation of a member of the bar which sticks. I know as a judge that there are some lawyers who I know will never be easy on the truth. And I do believe, therefore, that I can expedite the disposal of a particular case because what they tell you in court will be the absolute truth in the case. Whether they succeed or fail is subsidiary to the cause. As commercial lawyers, we got tremendous assistance from the members of the bar on the commercial side. This is the home of the commercial bar. Mumbai is the home of the commercial bar, and I think that is what has sustained the image of the court as one of the leading commercial courts in the country. something that we have to keep up. But above all, I always ask myself, and I say this is a time of reflection, what is it that has made the Bombay High Court the institution of preeminence in the country? Why is it that we pride our judges? And now I look at it from a slightly distant perspective of having left this court as a judge over 11 years ago, though my heart is with the court every single day. The first is, I think, the fearless independence of our judges of the court. This court is known for its fearless independence. And that emanates from the portrait of Sir John Peter Grant. And judges who told the governor in colonial times that if you do not observe my writ which I am issuing, I'll close down the court, but you better observe my writ. So it's this fearless sense of independence which has sustained the court. In challenging times, like the years of the emergency, when people were losing their head, the Bombay High Court didn't lose its head. There were judges who were transferred from here to Calcutta. Justice Parsamukhi, who was transferred from here to Calcutta and died in Calcutta because of his health, but yet didn't waver from the cause of justice. Justice V.D. Tulsapurkar, Justice R.M. Kantawala, a whole lot of judges in those days who stood behind what they believed was correct in the interests of the pursuit of liberty and equality and due process for our citizens. The second important element which we must not forget is peer pressure. Judges behave as judges because you're constantly intermingling with people upon whom you depend for support, upon whom you look for guidance, upon whom you seek friendship in times of distress, in times of happiness, in terms of normal times. And third, the element of scrutiny which gets into our work. Nothing which a judge does, including keeping their mouth open in the court to writing a good or an indifferent order, misses the scrutiny of the bar. And that element of scrutiny is what guides the work of our courts. But above all, what is it that sustains us? I've been writing some interesting judgments of late. We've decided on whether royalty is a tax or royalty is a consideration for minerals extracted. We delivered a judgment yesterday setting at rest a controversy, I hope, of 30 years on who has the right to regulate industrial alcohol, whether the center or the states, so on and so forth. But I think what sustains us, that's an alarm clock that I better finish soon. But what sustains us as judges is our sense of compassion for the society in which we render justice. So for me, what has sustained me over the years is that student from a Dalit background, a child of a marginal daily wage laborer who got admission to IIT Dhanbad, but who couldn't pay a fee of 17,500 rupees by the time that he had to upload his documents and fee online, and would have lost admission which were we not to grant him relief. You can find 25 reasons of a technical nature not to grant relief to a citizen. But to my mind, one justification to grant relief is all that is necessary. Or just this afternoon, we had a student with muscular dystrophy who was denied admission for the MBBS degree course. And the medical board said that, well, the percentage of disability is 88% and therefore above what is acceptable for admission to an IIT. And I said to myself, what do these statistics mean? Ultimately, it's a question of the dignity of a human being. And so we granted him admission. And I said to myself that these are the things which sustain us. Or in this very court, when once we resolved a business dispute in a transportation family on the first floor, I realized in the afternoon that there was somebody who was singing in my court. And I said, I'd never experienced somebody singing in my court. You now have these mobiles which go off in your court, but nobody sings in the court. So there was somebody who was singing in my court in the afternoon. And I said to my Shirasidar, I said, who is it who was singing in my court? when somebody got up and said, "Judge, please forgive me for this little singing which is going on. Our family was battling this litigation for the last decade and more. Our mother, who is in her 90s, wouldn't listen to us. She insisted in coming back to your court and to sing a song, a shabad, as a blessing to you." What do you do? Where do you find answers to this? Technology you have referred to. I had a very interesting experience today, and I'll close with that. I had to call a colleague for dinner, and we decided to invite their family, so I was calling up his daughter. Now, I had in my mobile, one of my problems is I always store mobile numbers, even if I may or may not be returning the call again. So I had stored the mobile number, but I had two people by exactly the same name stored in my mobile of two different individuals. Now I called the wrong person, and I right away started talking about the dinner next week, how her parents have agreed to very graciously come and have dinner with us. And she said, "But sir, I think you've got the wrong person. This is the wrong whatever person that you're talking to," and she mentioned her name. Well, I've been trained at the bar, so I immediately flipped the conversation and said, "Well, how are you doing at the bar?" Not to be phased out by the conversation. So she said, "Well, so, I've just had a small baby. I've just delivered a baby. So practice is kind of off and on." And she said, "I wish the video conferencing were a little more robust. If it were, I don't think I would have had to stop my practice merely because I've delivered a child." And that sort of stayed with me for the whole day. And I said that obviously we have to do something, because if we have to make our profession a more gender equal profession, an inclusive profession, why should we be in a situation where young women who, as a result of familial responsibilities, are juggling manifold tasks at home? And we know that women in our society are professionals, they're mothers-in-law, they are relatives, they are making these visits, flying visits to hospitals, they're visiting their parents in different towns in the state and beyond. Why should it be that we should not create equal conditions where we make our courts as worthy places, as places where women can succeed at the bar? Why does a woman have to behave like a man in order to succeed at the bar? In other words, to give up familial responsibilities. I think it's important that therefore courts across India use the benefit of technology for truly reaching out to citizens, for truly reaching out to professionals. Because my purpose in technology over the last 5 years has not been to make technology as some newfangled idea which we implement. Of course, we have a war room in the Supreme Court which we opened up to the journalists last evening. We have a data center which is coming up, which is going to house all our servers. Our data is on the cloud, and I could bore you with all the technical details, which I'm not going to do. But together with all these initiatives, the idea is to make life easy for common citizens. And truly, truly, that has been my mission. Well, I began by saying that it's a time of thanksgiving, it's a time of reflection, and it's a time of remembrance. It's a time of thanksgiving because every time that I come to the portals of this court, I think of all those who have come into this court in the great tradition of the bar and the bench, who have created the foundation for others to follow in their path. And the true virtue of a good leader, whether at the bar or on the bench, is the kind of talent which you nurture when you leave that institution. So when we talk about Thanksgiving, and I will not mention so many more people because they are still with us. Many of them are my own colleagues in the Supreme Court who have mentored, trained youngsters at the bar. But the reason I mention this is that at a time of Thanksgiving, as it is for me, it's important to remember that We are not standalone creatures who rise out of the ashes, so to speak, but we are really instruments in this great tradition of our court, a tradition which has been born and which has been sustained by the cooperation between the bar and the bench. Reflection. Reflection for the simple reason that there are n number of smart people in the world. One person has to become the Chief Justice of India. And I've always believed that it's important to accept what you have been granted by nature and by destiny and providence with a sense of humility. Also because the field of knowledge is far greater than either our repertoire of intellect or vision of any single individual. And I realize this every day when I hear an argument, when even a young junior at the bar surprises you with the kind of vision which has been put into the arguments in the case. And remembrance. Remembrance at the thought of those who unfortunately are not here, who've occupied these glorious benches in this court. And therefore, I conclude my presentation this evening by thanking each one of you. Many of you who have been people with whom I've associated at the bar, my opponents, people who have worked with me, people with whom I have worked with, people who have given me that first breakthrough at the bar when I didn't have any case, only so that I could get that first appearance in court. It's because of this great tradition of sustaining juniors at the bar that our court really continues to flourish. I said I'm not going to begin with a prepared text. I didn't have a prepared text. I wrote something out. It came straight from the heart. I began with, where do I begin? I'm not ending as yet. I will therefore just conclude by saying, where do I begin? There's a lot more to be said, and hopefully you will hear more of me, both formally and informally. Thank you very much for making this a memorable day in my life. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you, Chief Justice Chandrachud, for recapitulating, recounting so many events, personalities,